Father Lucian came to our Georgian town's aid when a mass possession targeted 6 local teens in the fall of 1997. It wasn't a random demonic happenstance, though. A bunch of 13-year-olds dabbled with a Ouija board and forgot to properly end the connection. And a week later, ended up being bound to beds in the town clinic. I know all this because I was one of the participants of that failed attempt, and the possessed teens were my friends. My grandmother told me that I had been protected by the St. Benedict medallion that she had given me when I was 5, and hadn't taken it off since then. She also lectured me that some things are not to be crossed. I felt deep shame and guilt as I witnessed my friends ravished by demons that contorted their bodies in inhumane ways. They spoke different languages. I figured some to be Latin, German, Spanish, but mostly it was a language that wasn't of this world. The words didn't make sense, but they made us scared all the same. The first night of their possessions, those who stood guard were found wailing and screaming next to their vomit with pants soaked in pee. As the clinic door got unlocked, they finally calmed down and explained how my friends howled like wolves and made sounds as if they were hungry predators ready to feast on those guards. That was when the lights went out. Total blackness shrouded them as they heard the sound of crawlings on the floor and on the ceiling. Once they were at the door, they found that they could not open it despite turning the lock. The eerie sounds of crawling, howling, growling, bones breaking, and teeth gnawing grew louder and louder, and only stopped when the clinic door got unlocked the next day. The town didn't wait for another sunrise. Someone from our church contacted Father Lucian that very afternoon. It was a lanky man of 60s with a clean-shaven face and bony hands that carried his Bible. The priest from my parish greeted Father and conversed about the situation of our place. Father entered the clinic alone, telling the parents and the rest of us that it was safer to wait outside, since it was likely those demons would inflict physical pain on others in the room. We waited for what it felt like a lifetime as cries, screams, and animalistic sounds echoed from that building. I watched the blackened clouds cover our town like a funeral veil as they swallowed the sun. The nearby lampposts that held clear glasses were suddenly covered with carrion flies, and the smell of death filled the air. What made me confused, though, was that I was the only one covering my nose. Father Lucian came out looking spent as he was drenched in sweat and almost fell on the ground, only to be caught in time by 2 men, who then made him sit on the nearby bench. The old man then spoke that the exorcism had not been easy, but it was a success nonetheless. Cries of joy from my friends' parents filled our ears as they saw their children were now back to normal. The teens hugged their folks as soon as they were released from their bindings and cried as well. A community celebration dinner was held that night, and Father Lucian was invited to stay as the town's way of gratitude. Everything would have been perfect if I hadn't seen something that made my stomach sink. The cover of Father Lucian's Bible had the upside-down cross. As if he felt my eyes on him, the old man met my gaze, stared at my St. Benedict medallion, smiled, and mouthed the word, "Soon." I didn't sleep that night as I kept hearing the sound of hooves pacing on my rooftop. I told my grandmother about it the next day, and she told me to never ever take off my medallion, no matter what. Grandma went pale as soon as she stepped in her garden. She found large goat-like imprints in the soil starting from our back fence up to the side of the house. My friends weren't really the same after the exorcism. What once were considered delinquents, now the face of the perfect children. It was like every fiber of mischief in their beings got casted out. A lot of our time was spent together was them praising Father Lucian. I spent most of it silent, as I was glad to just have them back. The moment that made me stop hanging out with them was when Clarissa smiled as she said, "Ruth, that medallion doesn't really go with your outfits. Maybe it's time to take it off." I mentioned that to my grandmother, and we prayed every night since then. Still, the sound of hooves on the rooftop didn't stop, and it was now accompanied by the sound of heavy, animalistic breathing. On the 7th night of our prayers, something else joined us. We were kneeling a good few inches away from our tiny altar when a creature with the head of a ram appeared right in front of us. It kneeled as well as started to mock the Lord's Prayer in a mixture of voices of man and animal, voices so deep and uncanny at the same time. Its eyes, full of malice, found mine as it shouted, "Hallowed be my name, Ruth. Hallowed be my name." The sinister laugh that bellowed from the creature drowned the screams that came from me, and it was when Grandma then threw the rosary she was holding at the beast. It faded away in a form of black smoke. After that incident, Grandma decided that we would stay in Santa Monica with relatives, for she feared that whoever was taunting us would only get more sinister. Whatever protection we had armed ourselves with were no longer working. Some evils were just too hard to fight. We had to wait 2 weeks for things to be settled, and during that time I watched as my friends attended Mass and talked to the townsfolk about Father Lucien. On our very last day in town, I saw them across the street from my house as I piled up boxes on the porch. They gave me smiles that soon turned vile as they mouthed the word soon. The trip to Santa Monica was not absent of horror. On the bus rides, I often saw something dark running alongside of the vehicle, and the motel mattresses felt like something was scratching from the inside, wanting to come out. My fear lessened as we entered Los Angeles, and the haunting ceased by then. At 16 years old, I started a summer job at a diner owned by a close family friend. I'll never forget my first table, as it was a family of 3, a mother, father, and their daughter, and when I approached them and asked if they were ready to order, all replied in unison, "Soon."